More and more people and pundits are blaming D.C. for the lack of jobs. With more than $1 trillion in cash on corporate balance sheets, why can't corporate America just put D.C. in the rearview mirror and take back the economic dialogue? In other words, like we said going into the break, shut up, step up, get down to business without Washington. Well, let us ask Bill George, former chairman and CEO of Medtronic, as well as John Allison, former chairman and CEO of BB&T. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. John, you know, after the jobs report came out and then you saw Romney take advantage of it, the president came out, the pundits, Twitter, everything lit up. And I just got to thinking, when are we just going to start ignoring Washington and literally just go on with our lives, and corporate America can do it at once and the people can do what they want, and D.C. simply becomes less and less relevant to our economic life? Is that possible?
I wish it were. I think that public policy in Washington has done a tremendous damage to our economy. But if you're a business leader, you have to make long-term decisions, and you're making those long-term investments in the context of public policy. And any intelligent business leader can look forward and say, wow, we got a real physical mess in the U.S., and we don't have any meaningful solution. In fact, the current administration solution is kind of a disaster from a business perspective, so it's not surprising that business people are cautious. And it's interesting, if you actually look at the numbers, the more cautious ones are small businesses, not big business. You know, BB&T is largely a small business lender, and if you look at the lack of job creation, it's mostly in small businesses. And I talk to a lot of these small business owners, and they're making the same decision. They say, well, you know, I'm getting by, in fact, my business is okay, but I'm not willing to invest until I am not only more certain, but I'm also certain that we aren't going to have some of the solutions that are so bad for my company in the long term.
Right. You can certainly understand the cautiousness of small businesses. Bill, you talked to a lot of large employers and a lot of large CEOs. What are they saying? And do you feel that maybe they're using dysfunction at D.C. as an excuse not to hire?
No, I don't think it's an excuse. You have $1 trillion in cash trapped overseas, and that if they could just have a repatriation reduction, you don't have to have a holiday, you would see a lot of that money being reinvested in the U.S. But well beyond that, leaders like Alan Mulally at Ford are really taking the lead in restoring the U.S. auto industry to competitiveness. That's one area where the government helped out with GM and Chrysler, and I think that industry has come back to health. You look at the oil and gas industry, take Houston, people want to move out there, but they keep getting constrained. We can't get a pipeline in from Canada because of the blockage on Keystone.
So it's regulation holding us back then?
Well, that's true. And you see a guy like Jim Rogers leading the energy industry down in Charlotte, North Carolina. He'd like to make a lot of investments, but there's so much uncertainty about what's our policy on nuclear, what's our policy on other things. It's constraining people from making investments. Go to Northern California, where the business leaders are doing a great job. I mean, look at all the burgeoning, but they a lot of the people they want to hire get sent back to India or China, and so they can't get H-1B visas. Really simple things. These are not complex things.
I hear you, Bill. And John, you know, listen, it's fine, but there's a darn good chance that in 6 months we'll have the same situation we have now. Maybe the change of the Senate doesn't swap. We have 33 seats up for vote. Maybe it stays the same, right? Maybe Obama stays in. Maybe Romney stays in, but the Senate stays Democrat. We could have this gridlock idiocy in D.C. for another 4.5 years, if not longer. So what do? Just wait? I mean, it's like, at what point do we, that's the point I'm trying to make. Corporate America needs to say, I'm just going to go forward with what we know today. You can't wait for change all the time.
Well, I think, though, if you're running a business, it's very difficult to do that because you have a fiduciary obligation to your shareholders, and you've got to be able to be comfortable that your investments will make satisfactory returns. And so you can't ignore the context of the environment. And really, to emphasize this regulatory attack on business, and in my 40-year career, I've never seen anything like it. It started with the banking industry, but it's across all industries. And that makes it very difficult to invest because you don't know what the next politically correct arena is going to be. I'll give you one example. The Fed's been printing money like crazy, and yet it hadn't turned into actual growth in the economy, largely because people don't want to borrow the money, and partly because what's happened, the regulators have tightened the lending standards radically in the banking business. They're tighter than they've been in my 40-year career. And so Tom comes in, he gets turned down for a loan, he goes and tells all his friends he got turned down, and they're actually scared to come to the bank, and makes them more conservative. But the banking regulators are playing a really destructive role, and it's much worse than, we had a correction in the early 80s, we had a correction in the early 90s. The regulators overreacted then, but this time they're overreacting in spades.
There's an awful lot of red tape out there. Bill, if you were still a CEO, would you be hiring now?
Yes, I would, and I'd be investing. I agree with John, but I'll agree with Brian. It's going to be 4.5 years of gridlock whomever gets elected president. I think you're going to see gridlock. But somehow we have to come to our rational senses and allow the growth industries to grow, and I'm hoping we'll see more of that. But meanwhile, I think the progressive business leaders are moving ahead. They're making the investments, and they're getting competitive. We started a big competitive study up at Harvard Business School, and Michael Porter and Jan Rifkin and others of us are working very dedicatedly on that, not worrying about the government. Let's get business really competitive in this country. And I'll tell you, today, a lot of manufacturing is coming back to the U.S. because we're finding, if you look at total cost, we're very competitive, particularly if you have cost of energy, cost of logistics. So I think the U.S. is in a position to move forward. We've got to stop worrying about Europe. Look, the German model is a great one. Stop attacking the German. Let's get back to fixing our own house. And I think if we'll just, like John says, let industry be freed up to go do its thing, I'll tell you, we'll create millions of jobs as we did under Reagan and as we did under Clinton.
That's a great point, Bill. And John, we just showed our viewers a great stat about revenue per employee. According to the Wall Street Journal, it continues to soar. Companies, I understand, will naturally hire when they can't squeeze any more productivity out of an individual. Are we close to that point?
I think the opportunity's there. I think with the right kind of view of the future at a macro level, it'd be amazing what would happen to our economy. We're making huge advances in technology. We have radically improved our cost structure, as Bill just said. If we really had a free market, we would have almost no unemployment in the United States. We'd have a phenomenal growth rate. It's a shame that we're underutilizing this opportunity, but we need a different kind of leadership.
Okay. Well,
so the question there is on productive workers. See, it's not that people are productive, and they're becoming more and more competitive with India, with China, with Germany, and I think that's the key. If we can have our workforce in this country be highly productive, because we're investing in capital equipment, we're investing in R&D, we can lead the world out of what is a lagging recession.
Bill and John, we have to leave it there, but great conversation. Thank you.